Okay, my name is Bob Masseroni. Today's date is March 2nd, 2022. We are located in the Stratford Veterans Museum, 5952 Main Street, Stratford, Connecticut. And it's about 2:30 in the afternoon. And I'm sitting here with Greg Sperling, who I'm going to introduce to you now, and we'll begin our interview. So, Greg, tell me a little bit about yourself, growing up in Stratford, schools you went to, and things that you did.
Yes, I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and quickly around the age of 5, my parents moved, and I lived just up on James Farm Road, just short from here. More towards the Shelton line, but grew up there. Went to Chapel Street School, went to Flood and Bunnell High School. You know, as a youth, I played Little League football in the North End, Little League baseball, sorry, in the North End Little League, which played on the field at Sikorsky's, which is no longer there. I played Pop Warner football for the Stratford Cardinals for about 5 years as I grew up. When I got to junior high school at Flood, I played for the baseball team there. And then in high school, played both football and baseball for the high school there. It was a great environment growing up in Stratford. Had a lot of good friends here. It was a safe, comfortable place to grow up. The town, so it was a good childhood growing up.
So now you're out of high school. You graduated high school.
Yes.
What were your plans upon graduation? What were you going to do?
I always had an interest in law enforcement, so first I went to college in Castleton, Vermont. Castleton State College, which had a very good criminal justice program. I was up there for my first semester freshman year in 1978. And then while I was up there, financially it was a little more expensive to be up there in school in Vermont, so I had looked into transferring to Western Connecticut State University in Danbury, which had also a very good criminal justice program. So after my first semester in Vermont, I transferred to WestCon, where I finished out my 4-year degree with a degree in law enforcement.
So you finished your 4 years at WestCon with a degree in law enforcement.
Yes.
And having in mind that what were you going to be a police officer? What were you thinking?
At that point, that's what I basically thought, of the law enforcement degree, and that's what I would do with it.
Then something changes in your life. You decide to go in the service. Is that what?
Well, my service commitment is a little bit, unusual from probably most of the stories you hear. After my freshman year in college, I was contacted by the Marine Corps recruiter out of Bridgeport, and not knowing anything about the reserve program, he talked to me about the reserve program and how I could go to boot camp after my freshman year was over, that I would go back to school and serve in the reserve unit in Connecticut, and do my trainings in the summer and everything else. And I'd never heard of this, and I was fairly interested in it. And at that point, I was looking for something to kind of structure my life and to give me some direction. And so I'd gone down to talk to the recruiter, talk to my family, and then ended up signing up to join the Marine Corps Reserves after my freshman year was over. So that's,
So that would be the summer of your freshman year?
Yeah, so the summer of 1979, my freshman year.
So did they start training you at that point?
Yes, I left for boot camp at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, and I left on May 1st, and I graduated from boot camp on August 23rd.
When you say boot camp, the same boot camp that Marines would go to? Where is it, Quantico or Parris Island?
Parris Island. I actually went to San Diego. There's 2 recruit depots, and there's one in San Diego and one in Parris Island. Everyone is pretty much familiar with Parris Island, but I guess they have quotas. The East Coast has so many quotas to send to the West Coast and vice versa. So he had offered, to go to California to do my recruit training. But yes, it's the same recruit training as any other Marine that's, active duty reserve or whatever.
So I'm assuming that the stories of your boot camp would be similar to any Marine who went through basically the same program. Is that correct?
Be exactly the same, yes.
Okay, so you are basically enlisted man. You're not an officer at this
No,
point, right?
not at all. No.
Okay, that hasn't come up yet, becoming an officer.
No, that's going to be about 11 years away from
Okay.
my initial entry.
So you finish your first summer as a Marine. So you graduated from boot camp then. Does that make you? Does that make you a certain rank?
That was a private first class.
Private first class.
Because,
Okay.
And that was guaranteed based on the fact that I had some college behind me.
So how do you feel now about the Marine Corps? You've done the worst part. Are you happy with the Marine? You got to stay in at this point. You're not wanting to get out.
No, I didn't want to get out at all. I mean, I didn't know what life was going to bring. But as the years went on, I knew that I was going to make a career out of it and do 20 years, and continue on. I didn't know, for my 4 years of college, I continued to do my weekend drills, which means you go to your reserve center and you train on whatever it is. I was part of the motor transport unit, which is out in New Haven, Connecticut. So that's where I would go for my weekends, and our summer trainings were also, a lot of times at Camp Lejeune, out at Camp Pendleton, out at 29 Palms in California, things of that nature. Basically doing real world exercises, geared towards our mission, which was motor transport.
Parents, what did your parents have to say about your decision?
I don't know. My mom never really spoke much about it. My father, who had served in the Marine Corps in Korea, didn't really say much. I mean, before I left, he was supportive, but before I left, he basically just told me, when you get to boot camp, keep your eyes and ears open and your mouth shut. He goes, and you'll be fine. So, it's interesting. My father, not a very emotional person, not a very open person with his feelings and stuff like that. But, upon graduation, they came out to California for my graduation from boot camp, and probably a handful of times in my life he ever expressed any emotion at all, and that was one of those times. Was when he saw me and greeted me after
he
we
was very
graduated.
proud.
Yeah, especially with his history, being in the Marine Corps and serving in the Korean War. So
cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. So now we're still in your freshman year of high school, college.
College and finishing up my college, and so I graduated in 1983. And decided at that point to go on active duty, full-time active duty, once I graduated college.
But after your freshman year,
Yep.
in the summer, your sophomore year, did you also go to Marine training?
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
so each summer
Each
you
summer
went.
you had to go, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And so once you finished your boot camp, what's the next type of training you went into?
It would be your military occupational specialty. So
Okay.
basically whatever
Did you have a
job.
choice on that specialty?
Not because I didn't, because I had joined the reserve program, so I had to have one of the specialties that was associated with the unit that I was joining. Okay, so if
Okay.
I wanted to participate in the program in New Haven, then I had to be with the motor transport specialty.
So sophomore, junior, senior year, now you're graduated from Western Connecticut, right? And you got your degree in, was it forensic, criminal justice?
Criminal justice.
Criminal justice. And now you also have had, now does each summer count as a year, or how do they accumulate the time on that? Would that count as 3 or 4 years already in?
No, not towards retirement purposes. In the reserve community, your years are based on a number of points, the number of activities you get involved in, and things like that. So it would be considered a satisfactory year for retirement out of the reserves, but not equal to the counterparts that are on active duty.
So now the decision comes, you're out of college, and you've already made your decision, haven't you? You're going to go active.
Yep.
You're going to go active.
Yep. I'm going to go active.
Are there any other decisions you had to make besides going active? Do you have any decision where you're going to go, what you're going to do? Do you have any say in that?
Well, I do. I had a say, and part of the reason why I went on active duty is I didn't have any employment prospects right out of college, and I had the opportunity to join a training regiment that would keep me most of the time close to home here in New Haven, and then a lot of times just all over the United States in different programs. So it was something that I applied for and was selected for, and so I went on active duty, and that was about 7 years worth of active duty that I did in that performance of the duty. So.
And located mainly where?
New Haven, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, Camp Pendleton, California, 29 Palms, every
And your
place.
job was to do what?
Was training. It was to train fellow Marines in motor transport skills and combat operations in motor transport and things like that.
But you're still a private?
No, at that point, when I graduated college, I was a staff sergeant. I was an E6 at that point.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was eligible and competed for promotions all through, college when I was in my reserve program, and then graduated, and then shortly after graduation got promoted to an E6 staff sergeant.
Okay, so you're a staff sergeant. You're now, what, about 25, 26?
24.
Okay, 24 years old. You've already finished some 6 or 7 years of service. What's the next hurdle you see? Where are you going to go from there?
I didn't know. I mean, I thought about, at what point. I did 4 years, and then thought about getting out and pursuing a law enforcement career. But I enjoyed what I was doing, and really had hadn't developed any prospects for any other type of work. So I signed up for another 3 years in that position, and then I'm coming around 30 years old at the end of those years that I served, and I figured if I'm going to do anything else with my life, I need to do that now.
Well,
given
going
my
back to
age.
this now, during that time, those 7 to 10 years, were you kind of a teacher?
Yes, I'm an instructor.
So your class would be made up of Marine recruits.
And junior enlisted, like corporals and lance corporals,
Okay.
and things like that.
And your job was to teach them, was it what?
Motor transport operations.
Explain that a little more. I can't even imagine how to drive a Jeep or something like that.
How to drive, how to properly load, because again, with motor transport, we're delivering what we call beads, bullets, and band-aids, right? You're feeding, you're providing medical support, other type of support, and ammunition.
So these are those little deuce and a half type trucks?
We actually had the 5 tons. We had the larger 5 tons that we did.
So a lot of it probably centers around safety issues.
A lot of safety issues, a lot of keeping proper distancing while driving, taking immediate action, like what you would do if you had an enemy aircraft approaching your area, like we call herringbones, where the vehicles would stagger off to the side of the road. How to react to ambushes while driving in a convoy.
How about looking for these? What are they?
IEDs. Well, IEDs by then, at that point, IEDs were not a thing. We're talking about the late '80s, and that.
So it wasn't in your original training.
No, it was not in my original training. I didn't get that until we.
But that's going to play a role in your life later, isn't it?
It is.
What about did you night driving?
We did night driving with night vision. We did driving with blackout lights. Most people aren't aware that on the big trucks there's a small light in the front and 2 cat eyes on the back that are red in color. And based on how close or far away you are from the vehicle in front of you, determines if it's a solid light or if you see cat eyes. If you see cat eyes, you're in the perfect position. But if you see a solid or things are, so that's how you determine your distance when it's dark out and you're driving without night vision.
So what you're telling me is there's a lot more to getting in a truck and driving it. There's some complicated issues here.
Yes.
Okay, so I could see why it gets very interesting, and I'm sure you had trained these people well so that they were not getting into major accidents or any problems, right?
Right. So,
okay, now you said you're about 30 years old.
Yeah.
Now, you're not married at this point, are you?
No. No.
Okay. So you're 30 years old, and now you're about to make another decision.
Right.
Which
would be to get off of active duty, join the reserve community, and look to follow my career path in law enforcement. Right before I left active duty, though, I applied for promotion to be a warrant officer. It's an application process in the Marine Corps. They look at all your records, your evaluations, your physical fitness scores, and you're selected among your peers to become a warrant officer. And in the Marine Corps, the warrant officers are considered specialists in their related field, whatever that be. Okay, and they're chosen from the enlisted ranks, and you become a warrant officer, and you become
a warrant officer is a never land between an enlisted man and an officer.
Yes.
Are there perks and privileges to being a warrant officer? Are you entitled to go to officer club?
Yes. Yeah, you are a commissioned officer. I think the biggest perk and privilege that you get is the fact that you're revered by your enlisted folks because they know that you were one of them. You know, a lieutenant or a captain that went to college and went to officer candidate school, you know, there's no bond between the enlisteds and them. The warrant officers, you know, come from the enlisted. They know that. There's a sense of respect there. And also from the officers' side, they know that you're an expert in your job. You know, and so you get a respect from them, especially the junior officers.
So it's a nice place to be.
It's a nice place to be. It's probably the best rank in the military. That, you know, at least the way the Marine Corps handles it.
That's interesting.
And then your privileges go based on how high you get. So, warrant officers in the Marine Corps go from W1 to CWO5. Okay, and when you become a CWO4, is what I retired as. You have the same privileges in the military as a colonel. So
is it the same pay scale?
It's not the same pay scale. You're still paid a little bit less.
Okay.
But if you were to go to base housing, your housing would be comparable to a field grade officer. You know, so a lot of those things, you know, are good perks. So I applied for the warrant officer program just as I get off active duty.
I just want to interrupt you a second. When you say applied, did you say something about you had to take a test or the
it's not
evaluation?
It's based on all of your, you know, or semi-annually you would get written evaluations in the Marine Corps. Okay, and you still do now. So those things are on records at headquarters. You had to take photographs to make sure you were physically fit and looked appropriate in your uniforms. They looked at all of your physical fitness test scores because you did that. They looked at your rifle range scores, everything that you could do in the military. And then it was a formal application, which had to be endorsed by your commanding officer if he so felt. And
so a big part of it would be recommendations
yes.
from officers or
yep.
others.
Yes.
And so there must be a group of people who decide yes. Is there a ceremony where you become the warrant officer?
Yes. So all those applications go down to headquarters Marine Corps. They convene a promotion board and they bring in people and they go through the records and they make selections based on that. And then once you're selected, there is a large ceremony. Both my mom and dad were there. They were able to pin my bars on my uniform for the first time.
Wow.
So it was.
That had to be another
good.
cool
yes,
moment.
Very.
Wow.
Very
and
good
where
time.
was that? Where did that?
That was
happen?
up in New Haven at the Reserve Center at
Very
New Haven.
nice.
Yes.
All right, so let's pick it up from there. You're a warrant officer now. You're about 30 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, where do you go from there?
And I got out. I started. I was applying for police departments. I was applying for different locations and things like that. But this is the summer of 1990, and this is the summer when Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait, and the military, the Marine Corps, is sent there. I'm back in the reserves with the Motor Transport Unit in New Haven. And lo and behold, in November of 2020, our unit gets activated and we're sent to Saudi Arabia.
No say in that, is there?
No.
You're going.
We're going. There's absolutely... They put a thing what's called stop loss, which means that even if you had a contract that expired, you stay in the military until they're done with you. Okay, so it's... you know, they can't have people coming and going in the middle of, you know, of combat or war.
Did you anticipate you would be activated?
You know, I thought originally that we would because the invasion happened in August and, you know, it didn't take, it was, I think, the day after Thanksgiving that we got notified. So, come around October, November, I'm like, I guess they don't need us, you know, because everybody's on their way there and, you know, we're still not going anywhere. You know, it was the Friday after Thanksgiving that year that I got the phone call that said that we would be activated.
Once you got the phone call, how long was the time before you ended up over there? How long was that?
About a month.
A month.
Yep.
So where did you go? Explain the steps.
We went to Camp Pendleton in California, where there was a lot of administrative things to get taken care of as far as pay and wills and powers of attorney and things like that. We did some additional follow-on training, about where we were going and what the culture was like and what the people were like and what to expect there. And then we were there. I mean, that's...
Were you flown from California over there?
Right to...
Not a straight flight.
No, I mean, we didn't get off the plane. It stopped to refuel at a couple of different places, but we were on the plane the whole time.
Stayed on the plane. Were there other people on the plane that you knew from your assignments?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so you weren't. It wasn't like you didn't know anybody.
Correct. It's not like I didn't know anybody at all. We all.
What you're thinking now? During this period of time, with all of this travel, which had to be hours, if not even days, what's going through your mind? You're about to go into a combat zone.
Well, I can tell you that probably one of the first aha moments was we were approaching, we had gone into the Saudi Arabian airspace, and the pilot came over, the intercom, and, we're flying commercial planes, but it's just Marines. It's like a charter almost. But the pilots,
it wasn't a service plane.
No. People don't know, but the Mobile Air Command in the United States, the government buys so many civilian airplanes and ships, and they give them to the airlines, but the caveat is if we ever need them, they're ours. So we actually flew over an American Airlines plane with pilots and stewardesses that had volunteered to do it. So the plane was all Marines, but the pilot comes over and says we got into Saudi Arabian space.
There were only Marines on the plane.
Yep.
Okay, but like piloted by regular pilots. Okay.
And they said we came into Kuwaiti airspace, or I should say Saudi airspace, and all of a sudden I look out the window and off the wing of our plane is an F-16 with everything underneath it, like all the bombs and missiles, and I kind of think, this is for real.
Protecting you?
Yes, they were escorting us into the airfield. And at that point it was like, oh boy.
So now you realize that this
is real.
Serious.
This is real.
Okay. No incident though.
No incidents. No, we got to the location that we were going to be in. We were first at the Port of Jubail. The Port of Jubail was a brand new seaport they had built in Saudi Arabia. And the reason that was chosen, obviously, is because we had all of the shipping coming in and bringing the material and the vehicles and everything else. So the first mission that our battalion had was to unload the ships and get the gear out into the desert where all the infantry units were and things of that nature. And then when we finished that, we moved up into the desert close to Kuwait.
Okay, let's back up. Yep. So you're offloading.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You hearing explosions? Is there anything going on? The only
thing that was going on was we would get the siren alerts every now and then because Saddam Hussein had the Scud missiles, and he did have, or they suspected that he had chemical weapons at the time.
Did you have gas masks?
We had gas masks. We had the full gas mask, and also our what they call the mop suits, which is the rubber boots, the slacks, and the
kind of like a
hazmat thing. It's like a hazmat, and you had to be able to get into that suit within a specific specific period of time.
Yeah.
So every time that siren
you heard
went
the
off,
sirens, where did you have places to go? Did you have shelters?
Right. We had bunkers that were built in sandbag bunkers, but the first thing was to get to one of those and to get your clothing, the mask on and the rest of it.
So that's a concern, especially since I recall at that time they didn't know what this guy had and what he was capable of doing.
Right.
So now you offload and the trucks go out into the desert. You go with the trucks?
Well, we went, and that when we start developing what they call mobile detachments, which stay out in the field close to the artillery and the infantry units, and you provide direct support. So in motor transport, you have what they call general support, and that's from the port where the ships are up until the direct support areas. And then those direct support units are the ones that are feeding the infantry units and the tank units and fuel and ammunition and things of that nature. So once
and
we,
are people directing you? Are you getting officers telling you I need such and such, or I need more ammunition,
yes,
or whatever?
yep, we would get those taskings from the direct support company commander. They would put in the request. It would go through the operations, and then it would be tasked out to the appropriate unit. So we're doing that. And then, so that's, probably, I was there a couple of days before the air war started. So the air war lasted almost 30 days into February, where they were just bombing,
Oh, okay.
so there really wasn't much going on the ground other than, us moving a lot of stuff,
No, nothing. No further threats to you.
Not at that point, no. Then I got moved into a direct support role where I was one of those units that was right up there next to the Kuwaiti border.
Are you armed?
Yes, we're armed.
And what are you? What weapon are you carrying?
At that point, I had a 45 on my hip and M16.
Okay.
And
all of your drivers and all would also be equipped?
yes, yeah. And then probably one of the scariest nights there was that tactically they felt that Saddam Hussein and his forces in Kuwait would never come forward. They'd never attack, that they were in a defensive position. So the Marine Corps put all of its support units in front of the infantry with the idea that when the war kicked off, the infantry would bypass, and that would be one move that the support units wouldn't have to make. Well,
That's a little risky, isn't it?
one night, lo and behold, the Iraqi tanks start coming south. So, and
Now the support units are in the wrong place.
support units in the wrong place. Very quickly, the tanks, got their butts out and got up in front of us, and things like that. But that first briefing and alert was, the tanks are coming and there's nothing in front of us.
Wow.
But as funny as it be, and in the Marine Corps too, we always talk about, the reaction. But that next day, they started handing out AT-4 anti-tank weapons, and everybody was getting trained on how to fire them. So I was like, oh yeah.
Did you ever have to use one?
I did not have to use one, no. But, it was, again, after the fact, they said, hey, maybe it's a good idea. We hand these out and show them how to use them. So.
Well, I think that things like that happen, and
Yeah.
a lot of stories like that.
I mean, it's a good plan. I mean, really, to put, because, again, when it comes into play later on, we'll talk about how the logistics train can really affect the flow of battle. And if you can't keep up and provide the supplies, then it really hinders the battle.
Did you ever have to use your gas mask? Did it ever come up?
I had to put it on a number of times, but it ended up not being anything,
Oh, okay.
to defend against an actual chemical attack. So, which is, good. Because that was really, everybody used to say, please shoot me, but don't gas me, don't do any of that stuff. We just, you hear about the nerve gas, and, you've got your atropine, which is the injectors that are supposed to counteract the nerve gas, and, we don't know if they work or not. The government tells you they're going to work, but, you really don't know.
Yeah, right.
So.
Now you're living out in the field, so that means you're pitching tents.
Yep.
Your food, is it hot food or is it K-Rex?
It's a mixture. It's a mixture. The living situation is that when we moved into an area, when I moved to the direct support role and I was up in the desert close to Kuwait, the engineers would come in with their bulldozers and they would dig basically holes in the desert. So you would have a full, huge tent and it would be below ground level. The idea being, obviously, if there was artillery, it would be less destructive. So we were living in tents, but we were living in tents in a hole. So and the food was a mix of C rations or MREs. C rations were pretty much out.
What's an MRE?
That's the meals ready to eat. The package stuff that's still around today. And there was some, depending upon what's going on, there's some hot food. That they could get out to.
What about, you're actually in desert, aren't you?
Yeah.
So a desert, does it get cold at night?
It's cold at night. And
So
relatively.
were you equipped for the cold? Did you have?
Yes. Yeah, we did have the proper equipment as that's concerned. I mean, it was February, January, February, so it's not their hottest time of the year.
Okay.
So it would be like in the the 80s.
So they weren't worried about hydrating you, and that wasn't a concern.
No, we didn't have any concerns about that.
Okay.
And then basically, the ground war, as you know, lasted what, day and a half.
Yeah.
When the ground war took off, we did move through the breach, which basically the Iraqis in this area had set up all kinds of landmines. So if you tried to come across the border, you would have to deal with those. The engineers had cleared a path through that, and it was lightly marked. I thought it would have been a whole lot better marked than that of not where to go. So we went through the breach. We got into Kuwait City.
No incidents with mines.
No, not any incidents there. Got into Kuwait City and in support of the infantry, and basically it was over. It was a quick one, and there wasn't a lot going on as far as that's concerned. So once we didn't have to do a lot of resupplying because it didn't last that long. So we're in Kuwait. We come back into the desert where our previous position was, and now you remember there's like these ammunition dumps in the middle of the desert that we've been building the whole time, because if we're going to need it, you got to get all that back on the ship. So believe it or not, when the war was done, and from February to May, all our guys were doing was going in and everything we'd taken off the ship has got to go back on the ship. And then we got
no accidents there, were there?
No. We lost one guy to an accident. He was one of our mechanics, and it was a host nation vehicle. So basically, it's what we call Saudi motors. It was a tractor trailer that was one of the things like that, and it had a spring to bring the back down. It had two spring-loaded arms, and he was working on it because when you pulled the bed up, one of the arms didn't return, and when he was working on it, it let go and snapped up, and he was gone. It was one of our guys from Rhode Island, but it was an accident. It wasn't war related in theory, but so we worked that. We cleaned vehicles because again, the United States being the United States, you had to have an agricultural inspection before you could put a piece of equipment back on the ship to come back to the United States to make sure there was nothing,
You weren't bringing anything foreign into the country.
So
now it's, what is it, early spring?
It's early spring, it's May. Yeah.
Okay. And now you're heading back?
We're heading back.
Now you're heading back by boat or plane?
We flew. Yep, we flew.
Okay. You flew into where?
We flew into North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Okay, so we did all of our out processing in North Carolina to take us from active duty back into.
So you're back into inactive duty. So now you're heading back home.
Back home.
Okay.
Back.
Now you, at that point, back home was still with your family here in Stratford.
Yeah.
Okay. Mom and Dad are still.
Yep, still here.
They're still fine. Okay, so now you're what, about 31, 32?
31, 32, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the next step?
I met my wife at that point upon returning.
Tell me about that.
I mean, it's I was actually involved in coaching some of the Pop Warner football here in town at the time, and her daughter was a cheerleader. She had been divorced for years. Her daughter was a cheerleader for my team. I met her through, that whole interaction, and we ended up, getting married. So I got home in May. We got married, I think, in December of
the same year?
Of 91, yes. December of 91. Yep.
Very nice.
And then we had my daughter shortly after that. And, at that point, I had gotten, shortly after coming back also, I was back in the reserve community doing my weekends and doing my summer trainings and things like that. And that's when I had gotten hired by the state of Connecticut in the probation position that I was in.
Okay. That was in 92. In 92. So you're still in that same job. 92, 02, 012, we're talking about 30 years.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you weren't you didn't get activated again 2001
till 9/11. We got, we didn't get activated until 2003 for the invasion of Iraq.
Okay, so,
Okay.
all right, I went too far ahead.
That's all right.
Okay, so we're still in the 90s. You're telling me the activities you're involved in. Now you're working at this job in probation, and now you're married, you have a family. Where did you live? Did you have a house? Or?
Yeah, I had a house on Edgewood Street in Stratford.
Okay, so you had a house in Stratford.
For a short period of time there. Well, a couple of years there, and then we'd sold that, and then I bought the house up here on Main Street at 4001 on Main. So I've been there for
Okay.
probably since '97. I've been in that house.
Okay, so things are good
Yeah.
with you and your family, and you've got a good job. So you don't see this 9/11 coming. You're not. You could have not been aware that what's about to happen, which is a major event in the country.
No, definitely not aware of that, but it was kind of interesting because I was thinking about it the other day when I was thinking about sitting with you today and talking. But probably about, I don't know, 2 or 3 years after the Gulf War, there was still some stuff going on with Saddam. And so the Channel 8 News had come to our reserve center and wanted to interview people that had been there. And one of the questions was, should we have gone into Iraq and dealt with Saddam at the time, instead of stopping, like President Bush said, we stopped after we liberated, Kuwait. And I said that it was a difficult decision. Obviously, the president had to make. He goes, but I was afraid that because we hadn't removed him from power, that someday we would be back there. And that, it was something I said, like, I think in '93 or '94.
You were right, yes.
Not under those circumstances, but I thought it would just be something he did over there, not, the devastation that took place.
Yeah. So now, but you were not active reserve anymore.
No, I was still active reserve, yeah. So I was still, through all the 90s, I was still doing my weekends. I was still doing my summer trainings.
And now are you at your highest rank at this point in
Yes,
time?
yeah. I'm right at 9/11. I had just gotten promoted to to my highest rank at Chief Warrant Officer 4 at that point.
So now, the major event has to be the 9/11, right?
Yeah. But before that, I also had the opportunity as a Chief Warrant Officer, which a lot of people don't get, to actually be the officer in charge of that unit that was in New Haven. So I was the senior officer there for about 2 years leading up to the 9/11. So it was a little unique because not a lot of Chief Warrant Officers or warrant officers in general get to be in a command position.
And how many people did it involve?
It was 125 was the unit there.
Okay, so you directed them in what they were going to do each.
Yeah, all the planning, all the coordinating with higher authority, all of the things that go into running a unit and doing trainings and things like that. So that was like I said, that's a special thing too, because it's not, a lot of people don't have that opportunity in the rank that I was in.
And no problems with that. You were fine with that.
Yeah. I had received good training, and I had worked for good officers.
And I'm guessing you had good officers around you, and you probably had good. They call them NCOs in the Marine.
Yeah, NCO staff NCOs.
Good NCOs that that knew what their jobs were, and it makes it easy.
Yeah.
Well, good for you.
One of my probably one of my mentors was ended up retiring as a master sergeant, was a Vietnam vet who had actually won the Silver Star. He lives up in the Norwich area, Connecticut, still does. But he was one of the people that was in the reserve unit when I got back from Desert Storm. He had joined up, and so I learned a lot from him. He was a huge influence as far as my military career and just his insight and things like that.
We're getting to now 2001, right? Tell me what was your? How did you find out?
Well, 9/11 happened. I was at work. I was at work in the Stanford probation office, and everybody heard it and turned on our computers and dialed in and was watching it, live as the second plane struck the tower. And
at what point do you think I'm going back?
That day, I went home that night and packed.
So you knew what was going to happen.
I knew what was going to happen. I again was surprised it took as long as it did, but I was packed and ready to go that night.
And when did they contact you?
We knew that we were going in the summer of 2002.
Okay.
So there was a lot more advance notice. We were actually, I was at a training exercise supporting artillery at Fort Bragg in North Carolina with the entire battalion when the battalion commander held a meeting and told us that, you know, somewhere right around the end of the year we were going to get activated in support of the invasion.
What was the attitude, you and the soldiers after 9/11?
Oh, we were angry. Obviously, we wanted, you know, to find the people that were responsible and to, you know, do what needed to be done. So I think everybody was fairly eager to do what had to get done. So,
You know, I remember there was a great sense of patriotism in this country.
absolutely, yes.
Unlike nothing I had ever seen before.
Yep.
And people volunteered, people wanted, there were soldiers, they wanted to get involved, wanted to put a stop to this.
Yeah.
And it's nice, and I'm sure you see it, and as certainly as a veteran I see it, it's nice to know that we people in this country that will take up arms, they will fight.
Yeah.
So, and I just had that discussion. I don't think kids are any different today.
No, I don't
If the
think so
time,
either.
if they had to, they would do the right thing.
Yeah. I think they would. I absolutely believe it. You know, that's just instilled in us as Americans. I don't think that's something that can ever really get taken away. If it ever was lost, we would lose our country. You know, if that spirit wasn't there.
Well, it certainly is. It's something we always have to think about, especially in the times that we're in. And it gets a little scary because when you have a person like this guy, you think, what is he capable of doing? And when he makes a comment like, "I've ramped up the nuclear weapons," you start to think, this is a crazy man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that's getting off the track.
Yeah.
Let's get back to you. And so now it's you're getting ready to go back overseas.
Yes.
Okay, so you're and you said it was in May. When was it?
Well, it was late. It was in the summer that we found out. It was again December of 2022 when we were activated.
Oh,
To
okay.
go. You know, and again, we went to California again. We weren't there very long. It's a quicker, you know, turnaround nowadays with computers and all the things. So all of the things that needed to get done to get us on active duty and ready to go were, you know, a lot quicker than they were back in the night. You know, back in.
But
the
you're
90s.
used to it. Much the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Okay.
So then we fly over and we fly into Kuwait, and then we get, you know, bust up to the top of Kuwait, right by. I'm sorry, not Kuwait. We fly into Kuwait, but when we're in Kuwait, right on the border of Kuwait and Iraq. You know, and we're there for, you know, probably about a month before the actual invasion takes place. And again, we're doing training. We're going over sand tables and maps and scenarios and, you know, getting the vehicles ready and, you know, things of that nature.
So you have to know the terrain because your trucks have to go through that terrain, right? So you have to be, and this probably is when you're starting to hear about the IEDs, right?
Right. But again, the IEDs in the invasion weren't as prominent as they were later on.
Oh, okay.
We were kind of in a stagnant situation. The thing that, you know, struck us most on this time was that, you know, the infantry bypassed huge populations of people because the idea was if Baghdad falls, the rest of it will fall. And so unlike other opportunities or other situations where we're pretty much in a secure environment because we're behind, you know, the combat element, we're actually not, you know, because they're just bypassing units. So, you know, and then we're talking about 500 miles. You know, it was the largest logistics train that the Marine Corps had ever engaged in was, you know, 500 miles of bringing equipment and, you know, food and ammunition to the infantry as they were just, you know, hurtling their way towards Baghdad. So it was.
And that was your job.
That was our job. Yeah.
Nothing happened to any of your trucks?
No, I mean, we had trucks that got shot up, but not, you know, anything, you know, too bad. You know, there was Our vehicles have, cruiser. We have 50 cals. We've got saws. We've got, automatic grenade launchers. So if there's anything that comes up, the big guys usually take care of that. Put down suppressing fire. But we're just we just try to get there. We're not looking to stop and engage. We're just trying to keep going. And again, that one, didn't last that long. It was a pretty quick, ascend or, march to Baghdad, and the quiet that came, for the most part at that point.
Did you see a lot of destruction?
Yeah. A lot of destruction. A lot of vehicles, a lot of buildings, a lot of, all of that.
How were you received by the people? What was their reaction?
The media reaction was they were very supportive. They had been oppressed. Most of them were oppressed under Saddam Hussein. I think that's, later on, I think that's what, kind of confused a lot of us too, was like, we're freed your country, we're trying to give it back to you. But you're attacking us, and I just never understood. We don't want to be there any longer than we have to be. We want you to establish your government and, do what you got to do so we can go home, and you're still out here trying to kill us. And that was just, I think that, was a little difficult for a lot of us to take at that point, because he was a bad guy. The things he did to his people and the things his sons did to the people are just,
So you knew, you're informed, you knew all those things. So the stories about him wasn't, it made you understand that this guy needed to be taken down.
Right. I mean, again, for the weapons of mass destruction, or all of that you want to talk about that was never found, but this is somebody who, tortured people regularly, killed people, for no reason, and just, he was a brutal dictator. And he ruled by fear and violence, and, that country, I've always said, will be better off maybe, when it's finally settled, and I think they're getting there. But, yeah, we knew what kind of situation that was.
So you're finished there, you're coming back, none of the guys in your outfit were lost, right?
No, we didn't lose anybody in that deployment, thank God.
So you're packing up again.
Packing up and coming back. We didn't stay there that long this time. The idea is, again, politically, is get the reserves back home. Probably one of the hardest things I ever did was to leave my 8-year-old daughter at that time, to try to explain to her what was going on. And I have to thank an old friend of ours, and Greg Proudfoot, believe it or not. Greg was the school resource officer at my daughter's at Wilcoxon Elementary, and during their DARE celebration, he had brought Rebecca up and honored her because I was deployed. And it wasn't until then she thought I was away because I did something wrong. And it wasn't until that point that she realized, and my wife had talked to her after that. But, I was always thankful to him for doing that. But it was, that was hard. It was hard to do that, knowing that, I always knew that they were safe. They never knew what my situation was.
Yeah.
So it was hard leaving her and going.
Well, it must have been joyful when you got back here and saw her.
It was.
Where did she come to the airport, or?
No, she didn't come to the airport. She came to the reserve center in New Haven when everybody, when we came back there. So
that had to be a nice moment.
It was. It absolutely was.
Yeah. Now, is that it? Is that the end of the story?
No, I got a little bit more to go.
Okay.
So basically now we're talking about, the summer of '93, and I go back into the reserve community, and I had another year to go, and I'm thinking, what, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time, 27 years or 26 years at that time, to retire. So I had put in my paperwork to retire November 1st of '04. I retired at December 1st of '04. Or November 1st of '04, and in January of '05, I received a call from my former battalion commander. He was putting together a unit to go back to Iraq. he had nothing but young, inexperienced people going.
And he wanted you.
And he asked me if I would volunteer to come out of retirement to go back to Iraq for, you know, one more deployment. So I told a bunch of fibs to my wife and my family, saying that I didn't have a choice, that I had gotten recalled because, as many people know, if you retire, you know, you're still subject to recall until age 60. So I told everybody, my mother, no, I didn't have a choice. They recalled me. I got to go. You know, it wasn't until I got home that I, you know, told them the truth. But so at this point, and probably one of the, you know, most satisfying, but one of the most dangerous missions, you know, that I had undertaken, or deployments. And, you know, we formed up. We were in North Carolina. We went to the desert in California for, you know, a month. I received all kinds of training that I had never gotten in the other 26 years, where we were actually out in the desert and bringing attack helicopters in on, you know, via radio in on spots to blow up, and, you know, our live artillery exercises and things like that. And I'm like, why do I need to know all this? You know, so then in August of '05, we find out we're going to be going, because at that point there's about 3 active Marine Corps bases in Iraq. There's the airfield at Al-Assad, there's Camp Fallujah, which is right outside Fallujah, and then inside Baghdad. You know, and of course, you just had those horrific attacks in Fallujah, you know, in the fall of '04. You know, we're sitting there going, any place but Fallujah, any place but Fallujah, and that's where we go. You know, so we're on the base at Fallujah, and it's a pretty sophisticated base at that point. It was a prior Iraqi army base that was taken over. You know, it was bermed all along. It had sentries, and, you know, it was a quote-unquote safe environment to some extent. They had an active chow hall, which was kind of like normal food, and, you know, we lived in actual trailers, which were, you know, surrounded by bunkers and berms and things like that. And we provided direct support to the infantry units that were stationed in and around Iraq, Fallujah, the city of Fallujah, inside and in the, you know, areas out. And this is where, you know, the IID becomes the main target. We would receive sporadic artillery fire, you know, that somebody, or mortar fire that somebody would just, you know, kind of launch and run. They didn't have any direction to it or anything else. But every time you left, the IADs were, you know, were the main concern.
Never a direct attack on you, guys?
With an I mean, on the base?
Yeah.
No direct attacks on the base. We had a couple of artillery, but they landed in the middle of nowhere, you know, inside the base. It wasn't anything coordinated or anything that was actually a threat. The IIDs were, you know, just something else.
But you're still living under the gun. You're still...
Oh, yeah, you're still living there. You have, and again, at this point, you have Iraqi civilians that have access to the base. They're performing a lot of the service industry jobs on the base. So you always had to worry about...
So you're worried about one of them coming in with a vest on.
With a vest on, or planting a bomb, or doing anything. So anytime you saw anything, you know, that was out of the ordinary on the side of the road or anything like that, because that's what they did, is that everything was hid. You know, one of the IEDs that we came up on at one point was of a dog that was dead and split in half, and the IED was put on inside the dog. The dog was set on the side of the road. You know, so they did all kinds of things to cover it. And their method of deploying the IEDs continued to graduate also, because they started out with like a garage door opener. And then we would have the devices on our trucks that would block that signal. And then they would go to command, you know, wire detonated. But then they found out soon that, one, they had to be close, and two, you know, you could see the wires, you know, very often. You know, and then they started going to cell phones. You know, and so that we would have, you know, things on our vehicles that would block cell phone, you know, transmissions. But every time, you know, they upgraded, we tried to, and then they kept doing it. And
any major incidents with?
I mean, I got lucky one time. I was in a Humvee. I had a 900-gallon fuel tank in front of me, and thank God that whoever was pulling the trigger couldn't time it, because he set it off in between both of us.
Oh my goodness!
If he had hit the fuel
truck, that tank had gone.
If he had hit the fuel tank, then it would have been, you know, adios. But
nobody got hurt with that?
Nobody got hurt with that. You know, in my whole battalion, we had 3 guys that had gotten injured from IEDs. Nobody seriously. No, I mean seriously, man, stitches and busted up, but nothing, life threatening, which was good. And in the same token, when we first got there, some of the vehicles, or a lot of the vehicles, did not have the heavy armor on them. And this is where the maintenance section of this battalion I was in, working night and day, putting the heavy armor on all of the vehicles, so they could withstand the majority of these IED blasts.
And what about those rockets, those handheld rockets? Were they also a threat?
We didn't have much of a concern with that. The snipers in the city of Fallujah were a problem. So they would go out, and the sentries that were out guarding would get picked off every now and then. But really, it's when you left the base and you were in a convoy, or you're going different places, that it got a little crazy.
I want to go back to and emphasize something that you said. You weren't ordered to go on this mission, if you call it that. You were asked to go. Now, that means there's a lot of latitude in there where you could have simply said, "Are you crazy? Well, I'm not going to do that." And so I want to know more about your thinking. You are making a major, major decision when you said, "I'll do it." And so tell me, what's going through your head in that decision-making process?
Well, I think it goes back to the beginning of being a Marine. It's instilled from you at the beginning that you take care of your brother Marines, that as you go through the ranks and you gain rank, your mission is to take care of your young Marines and to develop them and to keep them safe and to do that. So when he explained the situation that, there was, out of 125 were going, there was probably 25 that had any experience, and had not deployed prior to that. It really just was a sense of where I felt I had to go to protect them, to teach them, to help to keep them safe,
and
have them.
That's very noble.
Back.
That is very, very noble. Nice to know that there's people around like you. You are an honorable person.
Thank you.
Really, that's a huge, huge decision. I don't know many people that could make that decision. The easy way is to say, I've done my share. You did your share, and then some, and yet you go back. I'll tell you, if it were up to me, I'd pin a medal on you. I don't know if they ever said pin the medal on you, but you deserve a medal for that. That's above and beyond the Call of Duty, what you did. So I commend you for that. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy that you didn't get hurt as a result. So now you're coming back home.
Yep. So now we're basically it's May time frame again, and we're rotating out. It was the time there, other than the missions, it was we called it Groundhog Day because every day was the same. It was they used to feed us these nasty frozen lobster tails on Sundays. So we would joke and say, "How many more lobster tails do we go home?" But it was.
This is in Fallujah.
This is in Fallujah.
Now, Fallujah, we hear a lot about Fallujah because there was a lot of activity around.
Yeah. It was not a welcoming place at the time. Ramadi, which is just beyond Fallujah, we used to go to Ramadi also, support the units that were there. That was a very active anti-American place.
It wasn't like you were going to any R&R around there.
No. One of my first experiences when I got there was I was the operations officer. I had a captain who was in charge of our motor transport unit. I was the operations officer, the second in command for that unit, and I had gone on the advanced party to do the left seat, right seat with the guys that were there to learn what was going on. And I had gone with them. They were delivering electrical supplies to one of the substations in the city of Fallujah that had gotten knocked out. So we've got the big trucks. We have the huge containers full of electrical supplies, and we get there, and we're in the middle of the city of Fallujah, and we get out, and we're circled up, trying to provide some type of security while they're unloading these things. And I just said to myself, we're only safe because they're letting us be safe. There was just so many people and so many rooftops and
of course, I see so many of the movies, and yes, the sniper on the rooftop and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I would think that you constantly have to be looking and worrying about who's out there. Those people wanted to hurt you.
And that, I think, and that's the part of it too that, you know, again, where, you know, I talked to some of the young Marines who were there, and they were just like, you know, confused on why, you know, why is it that, you know, they're mad we're here. We're trying to give their country back to them. You know, two of the things that we got to do as a unit that I was very proud of is we provided force protection for their constitutional referendum and their first general election. And what that entailed was every polling place in the city of Fallujah, in the middle of the night, so 9 o'clock at night, prior to the opening of the polls in the morning, we took out the huge, like, take a Jersey barrier, and it's like 6 times the size. It's called the California barrier. We would load them on our vehicles, drive out into the city, and surround the polling place by these huge barriers so that they would be protected from attack on the next day. And then as soon as the election was over, we would go back out in the middle of the night and collect them all up and bring them back to keep it, you know, as normal as possible within the city. And then, you know, 2 of my guys took basically a tractor trailer full of ballots, and they drove them into Baghdad so they could be counted. You know, so it was pretty cool to be part of that, planning and executing those exercises to, you know, like I said, to give them their country.
Well, as you reflect on it, do you feel that you made a contribution to their well-being? You think that you helped them?
At this point, I think so, yeah. You know, I think their country's not perfect, but neither was ours when we first started. You know, and they really are. They're a new country, you know, since, you know, the invasion. So they're coming up on 10 years of their, you know, being a country, and so.
Now we're talking about Iraq now?
I'm sorry, 20 years of being a country. Yeah, Iraq. 2023 will be, you know, 20 years from when we liberated it. So, you know, and I think they're, you know, moving to, you know, someplace that's better than it was when Saddam was there. So, yeah,
well,
I feel some sense of gratification.
Well, there should be a sense of pride in that, what you tried to accomplish with those people. As you said, you wanted to basically make a better home for them.
Yeah.
And that's noble to do that. Now, if they reject it, that's on them.
Right.
But you tried to do the right thing. And
Yeah.
so, you know, there can be no bad stories about what the Marines did. You can't say anything bad about them.
No, and I'll tell you, the decisions that the young kids had to make on a daily basis when they were out in the community, you know, it's, you know, we had this basically, you know, rules of engagement where, you know, you could only fire if you were fired upon and you knew where it was coming from. You know, and early on when vehicles were out, you know, very much like, you know, police cars and fire trucks, the Iraqi people knew to get over on the road when the military trucks. But the longer we were there, the more they were tired of it, and they would just keep going. And so basically, if you were in a gun turret and you were on a convoy and a vehicle did not pull over, you had seconds to decide what to do. You know, and there was a protocol where they had pen flares, so they would shoot the pen flare at the vehicle as a warning. Then they would skip an M16 round off the ground in front of the vehicle. And if it still didn't stop, then they would put a round in the grill with the heavy stuff. But that's happening like that. You know, and
by the same token, you don't know if that vehicle is...
Right. You don't know if it's just an idiot or somebody with a bomb or, you know, a VBID, any of those things. So those are tough decisions.
So there has to be tension on you on a daily basis then.
Yeah.
It's not like you're at a beach and you're relaxing.
No, never.
Did that wear on you after a time?
Well, we used to talk about it all the time. You know, the Marines were doing 7-month tours in country, and the Army was doing 18 months. And we used to say, I don't know how the Army guys do it. You know, it's a long time to sit on the edge of your chair.
Yeah.
You know? And you know, so we used to give those guys a lot of credit because, you know, we would always say there was guys that in in 2 years had been to Iraq 3 times, but it was 7 months, 7 months, 7 months, and they were home. Where, in the 2 years, the Army guy would have been there for 18 months, but he was there straight for 18
Yeah.
months.
Wow.
So that's, I can't imagine. That would have been tough to do.
So, where are you now? You're done with your deployment over
Right?
there.
And I go
They're
back to
ship-
being retired.
You're back to be. So they ship you back home.
They should be back home. I go
Another
down.
reunion with your family.
Reunion with the family.
And I have a feeling the wife says to you, "No more. This is it."
Yeah, she was good. She was very supportive. My daughter was, she was very, it was very strange how she handled it. Back in 2005, 2006, I had the ability to have regular conversations with her on a sat phone. And she talked to me like I was down the street. It was almost like I'm not
Cool,
I'm not going to acknowledge what's really going on here.
Yeah.
I'm kind of just going to talk to Dad, just like he's,
Yeah.
at work. And
And she's how old at this time?
13.
Okay. So now she must be, what? She's in college now.
She's going to be 30 in April.
Oh my goodness.
She's having her first child in September, a grandson. I just found out.
So you're going to be a grandpa?
Yep, going to be a grandpa finally.
Where is she local?
She lives in Rhode Island.
Rhode Island.
She's married with her husband up there in Rhode Island, and so.
So you don't get to see her that often.
Not often. I mean, she's down, and we'll go up, periodically. But
Okay.
yeah, it'll be less probably when the baby comes because she won't be traveling as much. And
Well, we got ahead of ourselves, but that.
Yes.
All right. So let's go back to you're coming back. You're going back to civilian life. It's what's the year now?
This is 2006.
2006, and are you still in the reserves or are you out now?
I'm done. Totally done. Back to being
Okay.
retired after my volunteer.
You're out now.
I'm out.
Okay. You're still working at the probation officer.
Yeah.
Are you still now? Fast forward to today. Are you still working as a probation officer?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
As a supervisor for them now. Yes.
So I'm guessing you're in your 50. I don't even know.
62, Coach.
You're 62.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's your plans at this point?
Put in a few more years and then retire.
And do what?
That's probably why I'm still working. And I'm trying to figure out
Figure that out.
what I need to do. If the pandemic taught me anything, it was that I could not sit home.
Okay.
And I need, most of my closer friends from the Marine Corps and others, are 5 to 10 years younger, so they're not going to be retiring anytime soon. So, as far as, activities every day or, golf or things like that, I don't have any of those guys hanging around. So, but I still enjoy my job. I still like going to work. I still like, helping to train the younger group that are coming in. And
So it's not a
mentoring
tedious
that,
job.
no.
There's satisfaction
Yes.
associated with it, and so there's no reason to retire.
No.
No. And of course, you came back. You settled into your life here in Stratford. Wife and daughter, all well. Everything's good here. Meantime, you decided to become a football official.
Yeah, that was actually, oh my God, when did I do that? I think I started doing that in 1997 as I first got involved with, was it 97? Yeah, with officiating.
Okay, and of course, today you're one of the top officials, and I know they give you a lot of the big games, and you're spoken of very, very highly by, and I know many of the officials, and you have a very, very good reputation. I've watched you in action a number of times, and you're a class act on the field.
Thank you.
I'm proud to know you, and see what the things that you've done, and now hearing what you've done with your life. It's a meaningful life. You've done a lot in your life, and you've helped a lot of people in your life. And you know what? It's a nice thing to say that your time on this earth, you've done something that had an effect on people. You did more than your yeoman's share of contributing to making this world a better place to live in.
Thank you, Coach.
So is there anything else you want to add to your story at
No,
this
I mean,
point?
I think, that pretty much tells the story. Was
This story is going to be your legacy.
family
for
and
your-
friends, and
This story is going to stay with you so that your great 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 grandchildren will one day sit in front of a TV screen and they'll see you and they'll hear your story, and I think they'll be as proud of you then as we are of you now. So I want to thank you for your contribution to our great country, that you picked up the banner and you went, and especially the part about when you volunteered to go in. That blows my mind. That's such a noble act to do that when you could have easily said, no way, but you did it. So you know what? I've got to call you my hero from now on. You're my hero. So thank you for the opportunity to let me do your interview and learn so much about you. Thank you.
Coach.
Okay. So I think we got a great interview here,
Okay.
and